Hey, everybody, this is Dr. Jeff Tarrant, director of the NeuroMeditation Institute. And our guest today is Jonathan Fredette. Am I saying that right? Fredette?
You are saying that right. It is French Canadian and it's Fredette or Fredette, but I wouldn't, no one says that.
Yeah,
So it's okay.
I'm not going to attempt that. I don't trust
Okay.
my pronunciation for that. So, Jonathan Fredette. And so, really excited to be having this conversation today because we are entering in a partnership between the NeuroMeditation Institute and actually your company kind of has a couple names, which maybe you can explain because I know your one of your products is called Herbal Mystic. Maybe that's the product name, but then I guess the company name is Evolved Mushrooms.
Right. Yeah, we're still trying to figure that out. But essentially we have, multiple focuses, and Evolved Mushrooms has always been the forward-facing brand that has been delivering mushroom tinctures for the past 4 years to people. The Herbal Mystic Apothecary is the producer. You could think of that as our wholesale organization. They're the ones, our Herbal Mystic Apothecary is the backbone of this business. Without it, Evolved Mushrooms wouldn't have the tincture producer. And so that's my business partner's organization. And Evolved Mushrooms is mine. And so there's just so much interplay. And, that comes from us not having a traditional approach to business, which works well for us. And also keeping our own, autonomous kind of sovereignty within our own field. So like I focus a lot on connecting with people and sales and forming partnerships with people like you and doing podcasts. And then the Herbal Mystic Apothecary is just the system that and the gears that run behind the scenes to make it happen. And so we really wanted to pay homage to that by releasing some labels, and we're still going to figure out how that works. But essentially that's our apothecary. The apothecary is the home of the tincture. It's where our lab is. It's where all the glass is. But Evolved Mushrooms is like the entity that's going to go and connect to people. It's the mycelium. So
Great, I love it. And so, I actually met Jonathan 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I'm not sure. A few years ago, we were introduced to each other, and I learned a little bit about what he was up to at the time, kind of making these tinctures, combining different herbs and mushrooms for different effects. And of course, that's kind of right up my alley, things that I'm interested in. And I've used a few of his products, and I really liked them. And then more recently, we got reconnected, and I started looking at some of the tinctures that he's put together. And almost instantaneously, as soon as I saw them and saw some of the descriptions of what some of his tinctures do, I was like, holy smokes, some of these line up perfectly with the 4 styles of neuromeditation. So hence our connection is we have decided to create a line of tinctures that is going to be formulated by Jonathan and his companies for the NeuroMeditation Institute. And so what we wanted to do today was to introduce everyone to what these different tinctures are, what's in them, and why they seem to be such a good match for the 4 styles.
yeah, so we start with the focus blend, which is going to be, we wanted to give a tool for the brain to help focus, because I know that's one style that's so prolific in meditation, is just that present moment where you're not letting your mind wander, but you actually have to give energy to focusing in on the practice. And that's pretty difficult, especially for people like myself and other Americans whose mind wanders, in a million different directions right when you sit down and close your eyes. But we wanted to give a blend that would help essentially nurture the brain and nourish the nervous system and give it food so that it can actually sit down and focus better. And so in this blend that we've crafted for focus, we have lion's mane, which is a completely popular mushroom. It's well known. It's one of the most well-known mushrooms. It's been known to help with neuroplasticity, which is incredibly significant. It's been known to help with BDNF production, which is brain-derived nootropic factor, which helps with stimulating new nerve growths and new neural connections, right? Of course, I'm more saying this for your audience because I know that I'm not going to teach you anything, right? But the ingredients that we have with this too are really interesting because we've chosen these herbs to go along with lion's mane that could help synergize the effects. So Bacopa is a really well-known nootropic that helps with memory, concentration, focus. Things like Gingko. Gingko is one of the oldest trees in the world and helps with the nervous system, helps with brain support. Gotu Kola, and then Skullcap. So it's, in addition to it being a supportive blend for I guess neuron health and brain health, it also helps with the nervous system. So it's going to help with nervous system activation. The Skullcap helps these constituents found in the blend go deeper into the body, go deeper into the nervous system, and we want to help provide positive neuron health. So that's what this blend is here to focus on. Its focus. It's here to help people actually sit down and be able to maintain that present mindedness.
Yeah, I love it. And, a couple of the things you said, I think, really stand out, because one of the things that we emphasize with the focus style of meditation is that it's really, that's kind of the key meditation if you're trying to enhance your cognitive functioning. If you're trying to improve your attention or your executive functions or your memory, some of these things that you mentioned, focus is really the style, because you're activating the frontal lobe. Anytime you're holding your attention or your concentration on a single object, which is really what a focus practice is, you're really engaging that frontal lobe. And you said it right at the beginning, that takes a lot of energy. And so, but we don't want people to effort in that, right? So it takes a lot of energy to hold your attention, but then we're asking people to do it without effort. And it's like, So to me, it makes perfect sense that we need to find ways to support the brain in doing that process, particularly, as you mentioned, right? Like if you happen to live in the United States or Canada or some of these other places where, our minds are just so busy and so full all of the time, so distracted, how can we help people learn how to sift through all that noise and just zone in and be able to, hold sort of a single pointed concentration? So, I feel like this is a really perfect combination. And, I'm excited to get some brainwave data to sort of show these effects.
Yeah, me too. I think this is going to be a series of ongoing conversations. And what I love about what you do at NeuroMeditation Institute is just taking the data and presenting it and just looking at it just right there in the moment. So, I mean, I don't think anything like this has been done, well, at least not on this level. So I'm really excited to see, especially with all the different herbs that are in the blends too. Like, it's not just, we're not just looking at lion's mane. We're looking at lion's mane plus these different synergistic effects, plus the synergistic effect of meditation. I think it's going to be really powerful.
Yeah. So, one of the things we talk about at the NeuroMeditation Institute is this idea of sort of layering, or kind of putting different interventions together or different elements, even in a meditation, to support each other. And I feel like that's kind of what we're doing here. We're combining a couple of things that are pointing in the same direction. And, I think that adds power to the practices. So, very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's a good segue to the next one. Like for me, one of my favorite meditation style practices I learned from, I think it was from, Sam Harris, not directly, but through his app, right? But it was just the aspect of meta meditation. And I know that your practice goes a little bit beyond meta. It's a little bit deeper than that. But just the aspect of focusing on the heart and focusing on wellness and well-being and compassion. I think that was really, really powerful for me. I always had such a mental focus or at least trying to move away from a mental focus when working with meditation, but to have one that's more about compassion and rooted in your heart and rooted in emotional well-being and empathy for other people has been probably one of the strongest, most impactful meditation practices that I've ever had, especially in other visionary states as well. That, I find that similarity.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because one of the things we've kind of noticed is that more of, what we call the open heart style, right? This kind of connecting to a positive emotional state and, really supporting that and using that to connect to others and to connect to the rest of the world. it tends to be a more advanced practice for a lot of people. It's one of these things that seems like, and even a lot of traditions, they don't start with that. They start with more focus and mindfulness, and then introduce more of the compassion, loving kindness type practices down the road. And, it is, and especially in our day and age, right, where people can be very focused on their self. And, to really develop this ability to take perspectives, to have empathy, to open your heart is really important. And so this one I'm really curious about, right? Because, and for me, not being a mushroom herbal expert, I know enough that I can go, yeah, I can see where certain things would support focus. Okay, that seems like a kind of a low-hanging fruit. But it's like, well, what do you do? What supports emotional wellness, right? Like what do you got for that? And how does that work? And of course, you have a blend that we're going to call Open Heart. And so I'm really curious, tell me what's in there and why this might be helpful.
Well, the Open Heart blend, is something that that's one of the more new blends that we have because we needed it. People need emotional support. People need, more importantly, not more importantly, but equally as important, people need cardiovascular support. So it's interesting, when you're focusing on the heart, it's almost, you have the metaphysical, experiential, emotional support, and then you have the actual cardiovascular system support, circulatory support. And of course, with these medicinals that we work with, they do both. Of course they do, because the heart is, the effect of that is the emotional support. But, we have things like, so in this blend, Reishi is the primary mushroom, and Reishi is a mushroom of the heart. It's a mushroom that actually looks like a heart. There's this element called the doctrine of signatures, which goes back into ancient medicine. It looks at, like, if you actually can look at something, it can give you a little bit of a clue as far as what it does. And it's of course not an exact science, but it's really beautiful to find these reishi conchs out in nature that actually have this beautiful heart shape. And that's one of the things that they do. It's very soothing, and it's actually very helpful for heart circulation and heart support, and lowering things like LDL cholesterol and things like that. These markers that are, negative markers for cardiovascular wellness. And with, with chronic health, being so in the forefront of modern health, cardiovascular wellness is crucial, and that's why exercise is so important. But for this blend, it comes with actually it's actually an elegant kind of love potion that actually affects the heart in a systematic way as well. So it's got beauty in it, which makes sense. Like rose is highlighted right next to reishi, and that just tastes good, and rose isn't the deepest impactful herb on the heart, but it is, it's helpful. And it also tastes amazing. So like the experience of what you're actually taking informs the body as well. And that's one of the reasons why we focus on taste so much within our tincture production. But then you have hawthorn berry, and hawthorn berry is one that you can actually feel. And what was wild to me was, after experimenting with this blend, feeling the heart circulation increase because of hawthorn berry, like a really strong hawthorn berry extract. And that's been known to be helpful for cardiovascular support as well. And then paired with something like Damiana, which is, a light aphrodisiac, mildly stimulating effects that also helps with circulation and really helps with like embodiment and feeling good. In addition to yarrow, and yarrow just kind of has that overall, it's a local indigenous herb, but more of like a system harmonizer for that entire blend. And so in addition to it being a circulatory stimulant, it's also something that is good for things like depression and things like helping open the heart for a greater empathic response, helping, in addition to that, helping soothe so that you can actually really ground down a little bit more in your body.
Awesome. Yeah. So that's interesting because, one of the things that we recommend open heart practices for, and it's going to sound obvious, but, are for people who have struggled with depression or mood concerns. And, and it's kind of the way that the NeuroMeditation program works, right? Is that it's like, well, what is the counterbalance, And so if you struggle with mood, being in a negative mood, resentment, anger, depression, well, what's the counterbalance? Well, the counterbalance is learning how to feel gratitude and appreciation and compassion and empathy. And so, again, having this support, I think is really helpful because sometimes those are difficult emotions to be able to tap into. Uh, and so, especially if we get stuck in those patterns, of anger or depression or whatever. So, having some support, something that will sort of encourage or facilitate that type of expression, I think is going to be really powerful and important.
Yeah, and it has for me. I mean, I think one of the things I'm like that. I think for me, classically, like anger is a little bit more easier for me to deal with than things like sadness. So I need something to help me soften, to actually embody that and feel that emotion. So I'm excited to see what that leads to, and I'm excited for your clients to feel, you literally feel it in your heart, which is really exciting. And that's one of the things that I like about these blends, is you can actually feel it. So there's that like sensitization and the sensation of actually, you know, all of these practices combined. But this leads us to our next one. So this is our mindfulness blend. And, I think with mindfulness, one of the key aspects that I focused on being incredibly helpful is just being able to relax and just being able to have that, there's that term equanimity, where things come at you, but the response is so much less heightened. It's just, it comes and goes. And this is also featuring reishi because of its nervine qualities. And a nervine is something that helps relax the nervous system and just calms it down. And so this mindfulness blend is really helpful for soothing anxiety. And when we could really soothe our anxiety, we could, step into the body a little bit easier and have that embodiment practice. And so, this mindfulness blend is going to be really helpful for things like yoga and meditation, mindfulness practice. It also comes with ashwagandha, which is a true adaptogen, very, very well known. And the interesting thing about that is that, in addition to holy basil, which is found in the blend, there's this element that I'm discovering that, when you reduce the levels of anxiety, you actually open up new channels of energy, because that constant anxiety, that chronic stress is actually just a drip, and it's a leak. It's a leak of your energy. And so if you can plug that by reducing those levels, then you find that you have more calm energy that you can direct. And so that can overall help the entire mindfulness practice by broadening your awareness. And I think just too, if you think about mindfulness as a broadening and being able to take in what's coming in the present moment, versus anxiety, something that you're thinking about, maybe something in the future, or your bills, or rent needs to get paid. That focus is probably a lot more myopic onto that one single point, and you're going to begin to miss a lot of the different things that are coming in your environment. And so that mindfulness blend may be really helpful for helping your people really just settle into that space. It also has milky oats and licorice, and licorice is an herbalist's favorite, that is absolutely soothing as well, and in addition to milky oats. So this overall soothing tonic should help with allowing your clients to just settle in, settle back, reduce the noise, and just broaden into a better state of mindfulness.
Yeah, and I mean that's perfect, right? Because I mean, again, I know mindfulness as a term has been kind of, it's used all over the place now, and it's used in all kinds of contexts, to the point that it almost doesn't mean anything anymore. People use it to mean, pick something, right? Or they use it as an umbrella to cover every kind of meditation. But, really the way we use it is to talk about practices where you are uh, allowing whatever is happening in the present moment to be there as it is. And so that's interesting, because you mentioned broadening perspective, right? And so for us, a lot of mindfulness is really about being able to step back from whatever's happening in the moment without getting attached to it. So not grasping things that we like and not pushing away things we don't like, but stepping back and just seeing things for what they are and letting them be there. And so you described that perfectly. And of course, from our perspective, being able to do that is, in fact, the exact opposite of stress and anxiety. With stress and anxiety, we tend to get attached. We get attached to our thoughts, to our feelings, to our body sensations, and, then kind of get fixated on things that are unpleasant and,
Right.
are more future oriented. So, again, this is really exciting. And actually, this has been, so far for me in my experimentation, I think my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah. once we added licorice, it immediately went from, something that felt like it was missing to not, I guess, a bestseller, which is a good indicator that it's helping people. But also just, I love the taste of it, man. I think it's the licorice. Personally, it tends to harmonize everything, and it's also one that you feel like. Did you notice like a sensation difference in your state with that?
I've now, to be fair, so far the ones I've worked with the most have been the open heart and the mindfulness blends,
Mm-hmm.
and both of
Mm-hmm.
them, I actually I've noticed an effect with all of them. But I think the ones I like the most personally so far are the mindfulness and the open heart. Uh,
Okay.
yeah,
Now,
and
does that mean that you need to focus on those styles of meditation, or
maybe,
like how does that work? Is
maybe.
that the
Uh,
system?
you might be onto something there. You know, um, but it's interesting because you mentioned the taste, and I've actually found all of them to be quite pleasant, taste wise, and which is unusual, right? Because when I've had other tinctures, not to throw anybody under the bus, but when I've bought some other things from wherever, um, it can be harsh or bitter,
Mm-hmm.
and not very pleasant, right? It's kind of like you force
Right.
yourself to do it, and it's kind of like ugh. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah,
I have to say,
it's
all of yours taste pretty good.
thank you. I think on one hand it's interesting because it's like it's medicine, so you're taking medicine. But on the other end, you're what we're actually doing is helping perfect the expression of these mushrooms and herbs. And when you do that too, that taste actually informs your senses, and it automatically starts to enter the bloodstream in the mouth. That's what I like about the tinctures, is like the really rapid activation, so people can actually sense it within moments to a few minutes of them actually taking it. And the taste is huge. I think for us, we always have tasting as like the last step of the blends, and it had also informed us on what other herbs to include, especially like licorice, and when we put that in, the taste is just locked in. And I come from the background of culinary arts, and so that's always something that I'm considering, is like, what's the experience of actually taking this. I've also sold shilajit before, and there's no making that taste good. But at least with these herbs, they have such, like, Damiana, it's so pleasant. Rose sells itself when it comes to taste. There are other things that are a little bit more that are just gonna, well, they're gonna have their own taste, they're gonna have their own personality, like any plant does. But our job is to like really purify it too, so we do a lot of really positive filtration and pressing to get like the really deep parts of the herbs and mushrooms out. And I think that combination of purification and depth really add to that overall taste quality, in addition to like proper sourcing and everything like that. But this is a good segue into the next blend, which is Quiet Mind, which has valerian root, which is one of the craziest tasting herbs that I've ever had. Like, you taste it and you're like, okay, this tastes like midnight. Like, it tastes like good night. It tastes like bye bye. It tastes like you are taking the levels and just, the janitor's like clocking out, like it's time to go. We're going. That's what the taste of valerian is to me. And valerian is found in the Quiet Mind blend, and the Quiet Mind is going to be, you know deeper on the spectrum of yin versus the mindfulness and the open heart blend. Those definitely have much more yin quality as well, but the Quiet Mind is going to surpass that by, two or three fold. And that's because it has herbs that have sedatory effects, sedative effects, such as passion flower and California poppy. But it also has things like chamomile, which, and reishi, which aren't quite as sedative, but they help with relaxing the body. And so it has a greater spectrum of action than simply take some valerian root tea and go and knock yourself out. It's almost like, take this and begin to feel the unwind as it like gently guides you into sleep. And I took that last night, and I remember being like, why is my brain already shut off? And I was like, this is so nice. And I remembered, oh, I took like 3 milliliters of that blend, and I sleep so much better. And so it's a cool experience when you get to actually take sedative type uh, herbs that you can feel your brain function actually start to quiet. And so the quiet mind is such a perfect name for this, because you can start to feel things actually start to, soften the mind, to start not, less active brain activity. And these herbs are perfect at doing that. And I was actually surprised, that more people don't have blends like this available to them because of how effective it is. I've heard stories about people taking things like, Ambien or really, really intense, pharmaceuticals to help lower brain activity, so that, everyone just, often comments, I can't shut my brain off. It's like, this might help.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, of course, one of the biggest concerns that we hear from people who are wanting to engage in meditation is that, oh, I've tried to meditate before, but I can't shut my brain off. And of course, not every meditation is about shutting your brain off. But of course, there are styles that are oriented toward that. So, a lot of Zen practices, transcendental meditation, things like that. A big piece of that is learning to quiet down all of the internal chatter. And, so we just call it quiet mind, as sort of a generic term for any of those practices where we're trying to reduce the amount of internal noise. And, in a perfect world, you could get it to a sort of a 0 point. But in reality, if we can just reduce the amount of noise, that's great, right? And so, again, as you pointed out, many people find this extremely difficult to even quiet things a little bit. I mean, I know some people that when they close their eyes, their brain actually gets more busy. And instead of getting quieter, it just talks louder. And, so this is a really difficult thing, right? You want to meditate with your eyes closed, or you want to go to sleep, and the brain is not cooperating. So, having something that can facilitate that process, I think, is really important. Now, one of the things I wanted to bring up, though, is, you mentioned sleep and I mentioned sleep. And of course, getting a good night's sleep is extraordinarily important. And I think everybody understands that at this point. But we want to use this for meditation, not sleep. And so I'm curious about, what that might mean in terms of how people should use this, right? Because I'm guessing they're going to need to back off on the dose a little bit so that it's going to chill them out, but not knock them out.
Yeah, that's right. And I've primarily dosed this for myself to knock myself out, to be honest. I'll use about 1 to 3 milliliters. And you'll be able to gauge milliliters based on the dropper because it's graduated. But when it comes to something like open heart or quiet mind, I suggest a 3 milliliter dose for that. Like, really feel the Hawthorn, in your heart, and really feel, those Ayurvedic herbs taking action. But if you're taking Valerian root, especially, like, let's try a couple drops in your meditation practice. I've had a couple drops in Valerian in the evening, and I don't really have too much concern with it knocking me out. And I am sensitive to it as an herb. But I think it's gonna, on the shelf, your quiet mind's probably gonna go a lot slower than your other ones, just for that reason. You're gonna be able to stretch that a little bit further. And so I recommend starting with drops, and then gauge 15 minutes in, did you feel any levels change? Try 2 drops, and then your clients are absolutely going to know the threshold that they can hit with this blend. It's a strong blend. We go deep into Valerian to make sure that we get out what we want and for it to express itself in that. But I think 1 to 5 drops to start, and then to work your way up from there. But I think once you hit like 2 milliliters, you're going to have a yoga nidra class on your hands.
Yeah. And that's not what we're teaching. So,
Right.
So that is an interesting point, right? And that's probably true with all of the blends and all the tinctures to some degree, is that, finding the right dose for the right person is going to be a little bit of an experimentation. Finding, what works best for me. And, some people are more sensitive than others. With this blend, some people might have a really fast brain, and you might need a little bit of a bigger dose. in order to just get you down into being semi-relaxed. Other people, 1 drop might do the trick. And it's like, oh, that's enough. I'm good. So it's interesting because I think it is important to kind of point that out, right? That it may take a little bit of experimentation.